The world has changed a lot from then to now. The difference, I think, between then and now is the accessibility that are at the hands of our young people now.
These young people are trying to conform, trying to, fit in, because a lot of times we see that young people are being bullied if they're not a certain way or they're not in that era.
Like you mentioned, in the past, we would compare ourselves more to our classmates and maybe people in our community, in our neighborhood. But today, young people are comparing themselves to like millions of people.
We didn't deal with a whole lot of what we know today to be mental illness. So much has definitely changed, and the world is more open now. We have a lot more battles that we need to fight.
What we see on social media is not always authentic, but it's not meant for you to live that way too. You have your own unique way to live.
So sometimes it's not even the lifestyle of that person, but because it's what people like to see or what draws the attention, and that everybody's trying to get a quick come up. Nowadays, no one wants to be a trendsetter. Everybody wants to be a follower, because it's what's getting the money. It's what's making you famous. It's what's giving you a lot of followers. It's what's giving you, the likes and all of that. It's all about getting the social media up. Everybody now wants to be an influencer. Why? Because they feel like influencers are making millions of dollars just being in front of a camera. So you have to fit in by doing what people like.
If a young person even steps to you or even approaches you, that's an honor. There's something about you that they feel safe enough or they feel comfortable enough to even approach. And I think that's an honor that we should never abuse.
In everything you do, the God that you heard your mothers praying to and going to church and the laying on of hands and the oil pouring when you were kids, it's that same God that you're being asked to remember, because a time is coming when you're going to need him.
Welcome back, everyone, to another Real Faith podcast episode. Bishop's in the house. What's going on, Bishop?
Good. How you doing, Sister Heather?
I am doing good. But guess what? We have someone not new to us. She's been with us for I don't know how many years, but she is the youth pastor for our church, Power and Praises Deliverance Ministry. We have Pastor Kim, or Kimmy Kim.
Yeah. That was my crowd cheering.
That's your crowd cheering. Listen, I'm excited to hear the perspective of Kim, or should I call you Kim or Pastor Kim? I'm not even sure how to refer to outside of church.
Kim is just fine.
Kim is just fine. Okay, I'm Heather too. He likes to call me Sister Heather, but you can call me Heather.
What I've called you for years. It's hard to come out of it.
I hear that. All right, but Kim, yes, I'm excited because this segment or this podcast, we're going to be geared towards the young folks, the youth, the teens, and some adults as well, because to be honest, some of us are still in this same position, and that is struggling with habits, temptations, addictions, anger, lust, procrastination, anxiety, social media dependency, things that people are actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And we want to dive right deep into it because there is a solution, there is help, and we want to share that with the listeners today. So let's get into it. Bishop, I want to start with you in a sense because, you are a father. And when I met Bishop, he was a youth pastor. He was a youth pastor. How do you think things have changed from that time? I mean, you're a youth pastor, you were a youth pastor, you're a father, and you still help out, in the youth department when you can. What are the things that you're seeing out there that a lot of the young people are struggling with?
The world has changed a lot from then to now, and I've been doing this for a long time, and the difference, I think, between then and now is the accessibility with that are at the hands of our young people now. We didn't have. I think we were just evolving at that time. We were just coming into some of these things that we're seeing now. It wasn't fully uh, uh, developed as yet, but we were just coming into it. So, back then we didn't have social media how we know it today. There was no like Instagram and TikTok and all of that stuff at that time. So all we really had was internet, for example. But even that too was very dangerous. Uh, I say a lot of times, even in my preaching back then, we didn't deal with a whole lot of what we know today to be mental illness, but we didn't have it back then, or we didn't
Mhm.
recognize it, I should say, back then as we do now. Almost everything now is uh, surrounding to mental illness, whereas back then, you just okay, something's wrong, take a pill type of thing. Yeah, I don't know what they did with that. But so much has definitely changed, and the world is more open now. We have a lot more battles that we need to fight now. There's so much going on now that young people have access to that we didn't have back then. So yeah, definitely, there's the struggle is real.
Mhm.
As the saying goes, the struggle is real.
That's facts because, like you mentioned, in the past, we would compare ourselves more to our classmates and maybe people in our community, in our neighborhood. But today, young people are comparing themselves to like millions of people. And that's been an issue. I even remember, even for myself, if I had to compare, it was really about magazines that we will see different magazines and then they'll choose these different models and they did not look nowhere like myself or anybody that I grew up around. But that was our comparison. But today, they're being inundated with like million different images and different lifestyles, different comparisons, and they're believing that this is life, this is reality of life, and this is how life should be. And that's a major, major issue and a mistake because what we see on social media, one, is not always authentic. That's one. And two, it's not authentic, but it's not meant for you to live that way too. You have your own unique way to live. And we all have our own unique life. We all have our own individual purpose that we should live in, that we should be living, I should say. And so when we do that comparison, it is an issue. But from your conversation, Kim, what do you think that causes these young people to be drawn, or how should I say it? What is it about social media that have you noticed that young people feel like that is a benchmark to compare themselves, or that's what they see is what they should be emulating?
I think it's because on social media, a lot of times when we see mainly celebrities or anyone, coming out with a meme or coming out with something, it draws these young people to want to think like this is what life is about. This is what it is. And the society that we live in today, Bishop mentioned back then we didn't really have, the social media like we have it today. But now social media has become a big part of these young people's lives that it tells them that this is what you're supposed to look like. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to be into these days. So they have different eras that these young people tend to fall in. And these eras that you're in defines who you are, basically. And that's how the young people look at it. So depending on the type of era that is now out, everybody's trying to conform to that. These young people are trying to conform, trying to, fit in, because a lot of times we see that young people are being bullied if they are not a certain way or they're not in that era, or if they're not following the trend. Nowadays, no one wants to be a trendsetter. Everybody wants to be a follower because it's what's getting the money. It's what's making you famous. It's what's giving you a lot of followers. It's what's giving you, the likes and all of that. It's all about getting the social media up. Everybody now wants to be an influencer. Why? Because they feel like influencers are making millions of dollars just being in front of a camera. So you have to fit in by doing what people like. So sometimes it's not even the lifestyle of that person, but because it's what people like to see or what draws the attention, and everybody's trying to get a quick come up. This is what the young people are doing. They're trying to do that so that maybe, hey, I can gain a few money off of doing something that, that would draw the attention of other people.
Yeah. What is it in the book of Second Timothy where it talks about they will be lovers of themselves, or people will be lovers of themselves? It's crazy how when I first read it, I was young. So, but now that I'm living in a time of social media, I'm seeing it more and more, especially doing what I'm doing. I have access to social media more than I would have ever even cared to have access to. But I do see how, like you were saying about when social media, it's about being popular, being famous. So there's that addiction to being noticed, that addiction to being recognized that I believe that people are being drawn to. And
Uh-huh.
it's like but it's no different than what we kind of went through. Like, growing up in the States, we had what we used to call them street celebrities. There's another name we used to call them, but they were like the people that either they, did, broke the law to make money, or there was somebody who maybe was like the best looking, or maybe somebody who dressed a certain way, whatever, whoever it was, they just drew a lot of attention, and they were famous. Obviously, they weren't publicly famous, like the world didn't know them, but they were known around the neighborhood. They were known around the community, and I would see people make bad choices and do whatever they need to do to keep up that image, because that's what the neighborhood, or the street that they've known them as. So I got to keep this image. I see it's still the same that we've always been through. Our parents probably could tell their own stories, but it's just like now it's in your face, it's easily accessible, and it's worldwide. And I think that part is what makes it real scary, in my opinion.
I think, as you mentioned before, today's young people, they're wrestling with the anxiety and the depression and the anger and pornography and this type of addiction and that type of addiction and social media. And there's so much out there, loneliness and depression. There's some of them, they're even harming themselves, and they deal with peer pressure and even spirituality, their spiritual state. We find that young people are struggling with. And the truth is that children, youths, teenagers, they're not exempt from spiritual warfare. I think that's part of what it also boils down to at the end of the day. The enemy doesn't wait until adulthood to attack, but he's starting now. He's starting at their early age, their youngness, from the time they are born. Um, I believe it's in the book of Psalms 51 where he said, surely I was born in a sinful state or something along that nature. Surely I was sinful at birth, I believe it was. And, that doesn't mean that, children are evil, but it means every human being is born with a sinful nature, and they express themselves with internal battles. And, I think the scripture also says we're born in sin, we're shaped in iniquity. So just going back to, my question really was for you, Heather, but it was really based now off of something that I heard Kim say, which is leading me to ask, you're talking about, Kim, the, the attention, that children are going after pretty much. But, what I wanted to know was, what are some struggles young people face today that adults would often underestimate? Is there such a thing? Where as an adult, we underestimate what some of them are actually going through.
There's a lot of
Either one of you.
I feel like one of the things that we as adults tend to overlook is how much stress young people can have. I know growing up, my mom used to say, "You're young, what kind of stress do you have?" But honestly,
Yeah, that's
young
a very
people have a
famous
lot
one.
of stress. Even
Yeah.
down to the young toddlers have a lot of stress. There is stressors. And especially being a young person and going to school and having to balance church life and things like that, we often see it. Our young people are like, I want to serve God. I want to serve God. But then what would my friends say? How would it look on my friends if I behave a certain way? So no, I try to mask who I am in church, and then in school, I'm a different person because I have to fit in. Because if I don't fit in, I'm going to get bullied. I'm going to be made fun of. And that causes stress on a lot of our young people. And us as adults, we tend to say, but it's easy as you being a leader. We say it all the time, be a leader, not a follower. But do we know how stressful that it is for young people when we tell them be a leader and they say, well, I try to stand out. And when I try to stand out, I was bullied for trying to stand out. That's just another
Wow.
stressor right there.
Why do some adults dismiss children's pain?
Because
Clearly,
there's a
because we don't
disconnect.
understand. We don't understand. We clearly don't understand.
And I feel like some adults forget that you too was a child at one point.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I even had to catch myself doing that. Like I talked to some of my nieces, And I remember there was a conversation I was having with one of them, and I almost saw myself getting frustrated. Like, how are you allowing yourself? Like,
Yeah.
not how are you allowing, but it was more
Yeah.
like, why are you tripping over that? Get over this.
Mhm.
And I'm
Mhm.
in it. I was the same way. And there's literally an identical issue. Like when I say identical, like the same issue I had in high school is the same issue my niece had in high school is having right now. And when she came to me about what to do about it, and it's like God had to bring me back. Like, remember when you had that problem? And I'm like, oh
Mm.
my gosh, that was me. And
Mhm.
so now I had to pull back to say, okay, Lord, help me to show her how I got from there to here. And so one of the things that God helped me with is, first of all, he had to teach me to love myself as I am, love my uniqueness, love if my voice is deeper than the average woman. I'm taller than the average woman. I hated the way I walk. Like I was really hard on myself with so many different things because I
Mhm.
always would feel that that is what I compared myself again to other women, to what I saw, thinking that was what the definition of beauty really was. And so I had to go back to my childhood and say, okay, remember when you struggled with this? Remember when the enemy used to torment your mind with these thoughts and used to not love yourself? And I had to look myself in the mirror and say, Heather, I love you. I remember it was so hard to just talk to myself and compliment myself. But these are the roads and what, God had to bring me through. Then he had to tell me, he is like, he had to allow me to see how he sees me. And it was almost as if he gave me a good scenario. Like, how would you feel if you had a child and you created this child and you made this child and this child looks at you and your husband and say, man, you did a terrible job with me. Why do you make me look like this? How would you feel? And then, but you will, what, and then he said, what would you do? I said, I would read every part of their body and tell them everything about them that I feel that makes them beautiful, that is identical to me, but what I also believe makes them attractive. And so he said, so that's what he had to show me. Now let me show you how I feel about you, what I think about you. But it took, I said, it took time. It took years. Unlike her who had her aunt to go to, I didn't really have anybody that I knew went to because everybody I went to was making fun of me with the very thing that I was insecure about. I just didn't say it out loud. I'm sure if I said it out loud, maybe they would have held back, but I just kept it in, like, laughed it off like, ah, but deep inside I was bothered. Right. But it's not, it's being comfortable in your own skin and loving who you are, regardless of how you are. And also I had to tell her that what you think about yourself is mostly an exaggeration of what you think people see, because how you view yourself is not necessarily how somebody views you. You'll be amazed if you ask somebody what they think about you. It's probably so different than what you think about yourself. And it's probably actually better than what you think about yourself.
Are there warning signs that we could look for? Hearing you talk about, y- y- how you felt and how you judged yourself. Are there warning signs as church leaders, as a youth pastor, as a parent that we could look for in our children when we can see signs of whether it be struggles or sinful natures, even things that we've had to identify with? I remember, and I'm not trying to answer the question that I asked. I'm still coming back to you, but just as an example, um, when I was younger, I would, see someone who I looked up to, and I would say to myself, you know what? I want to make sure, even though I looked up to this person, I didn't want to become anything like them. Um, and I realized that even there are certain things that I say and do, it is it is exactly how that person would have said and done it. And funny enough, I was on the telephone today with a family relative of mine, and they were saying to me, "Wow, you sound exactly like that person's father." And I'm like, "Wow, great." You know, Um, but sometimes the point of that is that we can have things in us that are passed down that we are struggling with, that we are trying to fight against. So are there any signs that we should look for as leaders that will help us identify, case by case scenarios?
It's just it's more in the actions than sometimes with the words, because I mean we've been good at masking, and I know young people are good at sometimes masking what they really want to say because of who you are. So around certain people they won't say certain things, and but around their friends they might be expressive. Depending on who you are, a young person might not be as expressive as they want to be. So it's more in the actions. When you see them spending a lot of time alone, some of them are struggling with what they're talking about. I relate with you, Sister Heather, because there was a time I hated myself. I didn't like who I was. And I would always ask God, why was I born this way? Why do I look this way when everybody else is a certain way? Because and that also caused other people to make fun of me and when I was growing up in school. So I always wanted to be somebody else. I was always somebody else, never myself. And I felt like when I was somebody else, I said and did what I wanted to do. But when I was me, I couldn't say and do what I wanted to do. And if my parents paid any close attention to me, they would see what I was struggling with because I was not being myself. And again, that's why I say it's in the action. Sometimes you know your child better than anybody else. We're around these young people all the time. When I'm around my young people, I can tell you when something's wrong with one of them because they're just not themselves anymore. And sometimes it has to do with what they're struggling with and they don't know how to express it to you or don't feel like you would even understand. Because again, going back to what Bishop said, you know, mental illness and those things back then, it was like we didn't talk about mental illness. We didn't talk about the things that, so suppress us today because back then it wasn't a thing. But now today you're seeing more and more of these actions. You're hearing young people are taking their own lives and you're wondering what could have been going on in your life. But the problem what we don't see is that a lot of us are broken from our childhood because the crucial years of our lives is our childhood. And because we were raised a certain way, we were raised to think that we are okay. But if we do a mind map on ourselves as adults, you'll find that we grew up and we weren't okay, but we were conformed to be okay. But the society that we're living in today teaches our young people that if you are not okay, then you can act out, you can show it, you can be that, you can say you're not okay. But a lot of times our young people don't take it that way because they feel like if they say that they're not okay, a lot of things going to happen. So again, it's in the action of how these young people are behaving. That's where you begin to see it. It starts out in their action. They start to act a different way. They start to move a different way. And then you start to see outplayed, outbursts, and all those things. You're wondering, what's going on with you? And that's when you realize if you're paying close attention to them, you'll see that there's a lot of struggles going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I love what you said too, and it brought me to this point about how we as adults need to figure out a way to bridge the gap between how we are and how we treat young people. And
Mhm.
for example, like we mentioned, not to reiterate too much stuff, but I believe sometimes adults don't listen. I believe sometimes that adults judge before they understand.
Mhm.
I also believe that some adults don't know what it is like growing up today, and they don't even try to figure it out or find out. They just assume how life was with them is how life is today, and they don't realize it's so different, totally different. And so, and also too, I don't think that some adults believe that the problems some of these kids are having are real,
That's
right?
true.
So, and another thing that I noticed, and I think this could boil down to culture as well, that some adults just give advice instead of hearing. So that's something that I had to learn to do with my nieces and nephews is to listen, really listen, let them just talk, be patient. I know sometimes when it comes to some kids, will depend on your personality, you're like, get to the point. But I feel like we have to really listen. And it goes back to answering the question that you were asking, Bishop, whether the red flags, I believe you said, or what are the indicators?
Yeah.
If we have that conversation in the conversation, you'll get the indicators. You'll start to hear exactly what it is
Mhm.
that's there is troubling them, right? And if you become somebody that they feel comfortable, you could speak with, especially as a parent. It must be hard as a parent where you are the disciplinary, but at the same time, you need to be the person who's guiding them and the person
Mhm.
who's listening. And it's kind of like how God is with us. Not kind of, it is how God is with us. Yes, he disciplines us when needed, but at the same time, he's our guide, he's our counsel. He's the one we can go to. He's the friend. He's the one that not only could give us the best advice, but also heal us and deliver us and get us out of whatever it is that we're dealing with. So we need to mimic how Christ and how the Holy Spirit deals with us. If we could do the same thing with our young people, whether it's a parent or in your case, leadership position, or you're responsible for young people, I think if we do more listening and be slow, if not, just don't even judge, just come with a blank slate and just listen, and then you could really find out what's really happening. And I believe you'll be able to give them, the proper guidance to whatever it is they're dealing with. But yeah, it boils down to, like I said, there's a disconnect that if it's not careful, it could often look like a lack of caring, but it's really more a lack of understanding. And we want to make sure that young people know that we care, because the truth is, you do, we do, we do care.
Mhm.
Uh, but we just have to do a better job in and making that noticeable, as well as giving them the proper guidance to what
I
they're
have a
going through.
question. How do we become active listeners to to be able to have a youth like feel comfortable enough to come and talk to us? What are the steps to that?
Is that for me or for Heather?
Anyone can answer. Anyone can answer. Go ahead, Bishop.
um, what I find, I I think, first of all, let me again say it's a case by case scenario because every youth is different, and you kind of have to find what works. And
Mhm.
sometimes finding what works can happen over days, it can happen months, and it can take years before you find what works, before you develop a trust or a bond where a youth would open up to you. Um, but I believe that finding the right approach is what it's going to take. Um, I do work with some young people and even some adults, and when you know without a shadow of a doubt that the Lord has put someone in your life, where other people are finding this person to be a nuisance, a miserable person, someone who is often disliked, but yet you are trying to build a connection. I believe that the Lord has uh, sanctioned that moment, and that is your assignment.
Mhm.
And with God's help, you will find a way to break through some walls that the other individual has put up. For me, I can give an example of one day, one person, I should say. It every day I'm going to them. Like, where's your smile? Where is your smile? Where is your smile? By at that time, I had a gap in right there in the front of my mouth, and so when I smiled, I made sure I did it very wide, very big, very intentional, just to get them to smile, just to because I know I'm trying to get to a point in her heart that I'm sure has been very much locked in. So every day I'd go to work. Where's your smile? Where's your smile? We'd go to Tim Hortons. It'd be like, where's your smile? Where's your smile? How you doing? And we'll build up that conversation. Never once did I shoot for the point of why I'm I'm bringing up this or this discussion. So I wouldn't just start off with saying, why do you look so sad? Or what's the problem at home? Um, it took me months to even get to that part. So it was just every day. Where's your smile? How's your day? What are you doing today? And slowly, little bit by little bit, it was a work in progress until we finally were able to crack the shell. And this person actually opened up to me about some things that had happened in the workplace, where she was almost assaulted, sexually assaulted by one of the bosses, and things happen and so on. And she was still dealing with the struggle of that. So, and to now today, we are very good friends, very good friends. And, you know, we're in a little chat group. We talk, we check in every day. And since then, it's like that smile has just been on her face every day. So, you know what? It's a case by case scenario, but you just have to keep on trying. Don't give up. Even when you become frustrated, don't give up, because that person needs you. That person, when you see other people are walking away and you're like, when you feel like walking away and you can't, because that person really needs you. And out of their
See,
frustration, they'll treat you bad,
Hmm.
but hang in there.
mm-hmm. See, the key word you said there, Bishop, and that case was the consistency, and that's what I was talking about.
That's it.
Consistency
Yeah.
is the key, and now that's what's wrong with us as adults today. We tend to give up on people where we feel like it's just not working, we're not getting through, and a lot of times we don't realize some of these kids, they push your buttons, they try to see how consistent you want to stay. How consistent can you be in my life? Why should I trust you? Are you going to be consistent? A lot of these young people have people in their lives who came into their lives and walked out, so they don't trust easily. But the word that you said here today was consistency, and that in itself is what helps the young people draw to you and say, okay, you know what? Maybe he's somebody I can trust. That person that you asked every day, where's their smile? They were like waiting to see if you were one day just gonna say, you know what? Forget it. They're not gonna smile, but you kept it up. And that's with our young people. They're like, how consistent will you be with me? Will you keep pushing? Will you keep trying to find out what's going on with me? Will you get to the bottom of it? Because again, it comes with trust. A lot of our young people don't trust people. So consistency help builds that trust.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I remember when I was doing foster care and I had one child come in my home, and in a matter of hours, like this child was just, let me tell you, like no other. I'll keep it at that. Like no other, in the worst way possible. Um, and I've gone through several foster children at that time, but never had I heard before what came out of this person's mouth. It was a 10-year-old boy, and he said to me, "You're just gonna give me back within a matter of hours. You're not going to um, keep me," because he's
Mhm.
so used to going from home to home to home to home to home to home to home that he didn't believe that I'd keep him. You know, now I didn't keep him, not because I decided to give him back, but because his time had expired with the foster care and he was in my care long enough, that it was just timing that he had to go. But I showed him love. We showed him and we embraced him. We did what we had to do, and he felt that love, that we didn't get rid of him. But they do approach, as you mentioned, Pastor Kim, with that mindset that, you know what, you're going to be over and done with me in a matter of minutes, hours, days. You're not going to show up when I need you, type of a mentality. And that is very true. We need to wipe that mentality out of their minds if we're actually going to be there to support our youth
Mhm.
and our children.
You know, when you talk about consistency, it brought me to the scripture with Paul and Timothy. If you look at the biblical perspective of it, Paul invested so much time with Timothy, growing him. He was there for him. He was patient with him. And when you shared your story, Bishop, about when you would always talk to the young person and they eventually opened up, that investment of every time I'm coming here, I'm going to be consistent and I'm going to be authentic too. That's another thing. Young people love real. They could sniff out fake in a
Mhm,
minute. Like they
Mhm.
know when you're the real deal or when you're just somebody trying to put on something. But if you just, like you said, if you just be your true self and be consistent and invest too in some young people, then you're going to really see what's really happening in their lives. And then with that, you can better provide a solution or, whatever it is that they need. Because like any human being, they're looking for a safe space. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for a place where they're not going to be judged. They're not going to be criticized. They're not going to be lectured. They're not going to have somebody that it feels as if they already have the answer. They want to be listened to. And there's a deep need that's really there that needs to be solved. And I always look at it too as if a young person even steps to you or even approaches you, that's an honor. There's
Yeah.
something about you that they see. And so here is an opportunity that if you use it wisely, you could do such an amazing job. You don't know what you can be doing because it takes only when they reveal what's really going on, what's behind all of that, do you really know what's really happening behind the scenes. But it's an honor when a young person looks at you and feel that, okay, there's something about you that they feel safe enough or they feel comfortable enough to even approach. And I think that's an honor that we should never abuse and that we should never take lightly. I think every person, especially as believers, I think as believers as a whole, we should always be on guard and ready and discerning when it comes to what our young people are doing. And when I talk about discerning too, there are issues, situations with young people that you may not be able to approach them. Some young people they're closed. They're guarded. Their walls are up. It is hard. You could take a bulldozer and you're not getting through to that child. This is where prayer kicks in, intercession kicks in for this person. And then allowing God to show you what's really happening within that person's life, deep within, what the enemy's doing into that person. And so that's another avenue to how we can really help a person get from a dark place or, wherever they are to get them out of whatever they're stuck into. So they can just, be the child, be the kid that they should be. Kids need to be kids. And I think there's
Mm.
a lot of pressure with kids not, being kids. I have a question. It's kind of back to the social media aspect of it, but I've seen this too, where yes, we are more connected than ever. We have social media. We have so many ways that we can connect to the world. Yet, even in that state, even in what we have access to, people are feeling more anxious and lonely than before. Why do y'all think that's the reason from what you have observed?
The scripture says in the book of Corinthians, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I will not be mastered by anything. I think it's First Corinthians in the 6th chapter. I will not be mastered by anything. And in another chapter, another book, it says, "You are slaves of the one who you obey." And many people think that when we talk about addictions, we're talking about drugs or alcohol. But as you've just mentioned, social media is an addiction. People who play video games for hours on end is an addiction. Um, Phone dependency is an addiction. Anything that controls us can become an idol. Anything that controls us can become our gods. And so, to answer your question, I believe that anything that replaces the true and living God in our life creates a void that when God is supposed to be the one to fill what is missing, you are finding other things to occupy that space as opposed to it being God.
Mm.
The word teaches us that He is essentially our everything, our all in all. In the scriptures, we see that. In the songs we sing, we see that. In the prayers we pray, we are asking Him to be that in our life. But yet we are continuously giving ourselves to the attention and the addiction of the social medias and the phone and the games and everything else that the world has to offer instead of allowing God to do what he does best in our lives and fill the gap, fill the void, fill and become that missing piece in our life. And if we invited Christ in to the emptiness, to the brokenness, if we invited him in to fill that space, we'll see that the way that we feel, the loneliness that would come, he said that he'd be that comforter for us.
Mhm.
He'd be the one to supply all of our needs. The scripture says also, to remember also your creator in the days of your youth. And so it teaches our young people that in everything you do, the God that you heard your mothers praying to and going to church and the laying on of hands and the oil pouring when you were kids, it's that same God that you're being asked to remember, because a time is coming when you're going to need him.
Yeah.
A time is coming when you are going to need him and you're going to need to know what to do. And I hear a lot of young people saying, I don't know how to pray. I don't know how
Mhm.
to start my prayer. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to start. I don't know how to end. And, and so especially in our youth group, when I get that chance, I try to teach them the step by steps on how to pray before any of the activities start, how to pray, what to say, what to do, um, because it's important. And a lot of that void is because they don't know how to ask God to come into my life and fill the emptiness. They don't know what to say to get him to be invited into their life and to stay in and to help them with some of the issues that they're dealing with.
Bishop, I am glad you went there because that is it. Relationship with God. No real talk, because we could be connected technologically, yes, but being connected technologically does not necessarily mean you're connected relationally. Doesn't
Mhm.
mean you are connected spiritually. It doesn't mean you're connected emotionally. So that is it in a nutshell. Yes, we have more information than any other generation before us, but information doesn't automatically give us peace. It doesn't give us belonging. It doesn't give
Mhm.
us purpose. It doesn't give us our identity. That has to come from our creator. And so, yes, I believe some young people confuse connection with relationship because that's what they were born into. They're born into this world where that's what they see. So you may be a young person who has hundreds of followers or all these friends, but you could still feel alone because there is a difference with being known by God and what God thinks and says about you than being seen online, right? These are people. There is no relationship, and I believe that if we can show, you know, anyone, this goes for any person. If we can show what having a relationship with Christ does, it does fill those voids. It does show you who your identity. It does give you the peace you're looking for. It does give you some sort of purpose because you see yourself differently. Something amazing happens when you see yourself the way God sees you. It
Amen.
changes your life completely, forever. It's like nothing anyone says matters. You have this
Mm.
air of confidence. If you're not careful, some people may misunderstand it for arrogance, but it's like, nah, bruh. I found myself. I found who I am. And so anything anybody says doesn't matter. And we could go into that aspect of it too. Like, why do we not pay attention to people? Because that is a whole nother conversation with itself, because
Yeah.
people say things to you because of their own insecurity, their jealousy. There's so many other reasons behind it. It's not necessarily anything wrong with you. Because when you think about it, if my head is this size, if my teeth is shaped this way, if I walk this way and I talk this way, what really is a big deal about it? There is none. So a lot of time what we see what's happening to us is a projection of what's really what the person's really dealing with. And sometimes if they're jealous of you, they just want to find something to critique you or to hopefully pull you down because they either want to feel superior or hurting you just makes them feel better. There's so many different reasons behind that. We'll be here all day if we were to dive deep into that aspect of it. But it's just something about that relationship that you were mentioned with God. That is the key. That's the
Yeah.
answer. Knowing
Yeah.
who you are in Him, seeing how He sees you, asking Him, Lord, help me to see myself the way you see me. I'm telling you, I did that one day. It changed the game. That's all I got to say.
Pastor Kim, how can parents address these issues without letting their child feel shame or condemnation? Um, you know, you work in I don't know if we mentioned that already, but you work in the sector that involves children on a daily basis. And you also most likely deal with some parents also. And I I I was raised mainly by my mother. And y'all know my mother. She comes from, the countryside. She's one rough lady. We try to teach
Mhm.
her finesse, but pray for her. My father, he's just a quiet, humble, meek man. That's all I know him to be. So I didn't get the rough hand from my father. And so when I'm raising my daughters and my sons now, part of me still instills a hard wrath on them. I'm not going to say totally condemnation, but then again, in a moment of anger as a parent, you're not thinking condemnation and you're not thinking shame. You're thinking correct the child on what they just did. And you don't think about how their feelings are
Mm.
at that moment. Um, but as someone who works with children, how can parents address issues um, with a child's behavior, such as gaming too much or social media addiction, anything along those lines, without making the child feel condemned or feel ashamed. Some parents will shame their children right there in front of everybody.
Yeah. Yup. With I stand with you, Bishop, because I grew up that same way. My mom was the hard one. My dad is quiet. He didn't even never say nothing. My mom was the disciplinary. And that's that, right? But again, it goes to how can we then talk to the children of today without embarrassing. So I was always saying, how could we change that cycle? Because I can't be in a store with my child and she does something and I want to yell at her and then the whole store is looking at you like, whoa, you know? And a lot of times we don't even understand that people always say, learn to pick the speck out of your eye before you pick it out of somebody else, because you have people in that store would be looking at you like, ooh, but they would do the same thing. But then you have to understand there are ways to deal with children. There are better ways to deal with children than having to embarrass them and yell at them and so forth. And as Bishop is asking, how do we deal with children instead of like yelling at them and say, get off the game, you play too much game, or you're gonna there are ways to talk to children. And sometimes we don't even realize that we can use those very things that they're so addicted to as a learning lesson, as a teaching moment, right? A child who loves to play on video games and stuff, you can turn that into from being just sitting on video game to how they can go out and work in that field where they can learn that use their technology and their sense of technology to gain aspect in the world in front of them, right? So it's all about knowing how to approach the child. You know your child better than anybody else. So if you're going to approach your child, you have to approach a child on a level that you know that, okay, if I say this, this is how my child's going to react. But how can I say this in a different way? That it's all about redirecting. We have to learn how to redirect our words and our actions towards a child when we speak to a child in a godly nature. Let's go back into the godly way. When we talk about how God approaches us, God don't come to us in a certain way, right? Yes, sometimes God can become we see the wrath of God and it could be harsh. But again, the way that God corrects us, when we think about how we correct our children, is that godly? Is it the way would you want to your child to feel, neglected or feel not loved or whatever the case may be by the way you're speaking them? So when you approach your child, you got to talk to them in a way that shows love. Because a lot of time our children are looking at us like, you're a Christian and this is the way you're talking to me, right? They will use that against you. So we have to know that in our nature of being who we are, especially as leaders, when we talk to our children, we got to talk with love. We got to talk with care. There's just redirect their behavior. Instead of saying you sit on the game too long, how about saying, let's go outside for a minute. Let's get some fresh air. Let's do something else. Redirect the behavior instead of yelling at your child for doing something wrong. And I had to learn this the hard way, that it's not just about yelling, it's about calming. You can talk to a child in a calm nature and they will get it, because now they're saying, okay,
Mhm.
you understand me. When you start to yell, they're like, okay, you just don't get it, you don't understand. But in that sense, if you bring it down a little bit and say, I understand, acknowledge their feelings, acknowledge how they feel. Say, okay, I understand this may have been going through your mind, and I learned to ask this question: what happened? What were you feeling at the moment? How did that make you feel? When you approach
Right.
those steps and ask that question, you begin to unfold. So it's all about redirecting the way we speak to young people, the way we talk to them, the way we approach them. I'm not saying, because people will say, oh, yeah, Pastor Jim saying, basically saying, spoil the child. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying conform to what the child is doing. What I'm saying is redirect the behavior of how you speak to a child, and you'll find that their behavior switches around.
Mm. Yeah. I totally agree. It's how can, the parents respond to anger without escalating it. And
Exactly.
as you've mentioned, rightfully so, redirecting, asking questions. Yeah, I think it's easier said than done. We people who are born Canadian, raised Canadian, probably can get away with that. I think island folk are gonna have a hard
Okay.
time with that redirecting piece.
But you know
Yeah,
what?
that's great.
I love that you brought up the godly way of dealing with our kids. You said about it's our approach, showing kindness, correcting with love. I'm glad you brought that up because we just finished our series on the fruit of the spirit.
Mhm.
And these were the very things we were talking about. Am I right, Bishop?
Yep, yep.
About it's your attitude. It's it's a personality trait that Christ wants us to have because it's going to have the most effect when we're dealing with people. So you could say, like we've heard it before, you could say the right thing, but if you say it with the wrong tone, if you don't say that in gentleness or in kindness, it could come across the
Mhm.
wrong way, right? So
Mhm.
the fruit of the spirit is a great thing to study when it comes to characteristics. Every believer should study the fruit of the spirit. Non-believers should study the fruit of the spirit, because if you can get these qualities and you can master these qualities, then you're going to know how to approach people. You're going to know how to, young, old, in between. You're going to know how to deal with them the best way. You're going to have the patience. You're going to have the self-control. You're going to walk, move, talk, discipline, correct in love, which is going to be more effective. All the nine fruits of the spirit is key when it comes to dealing with your children. You're going to need those nice fruits depending on the child. So I'm love that you brought that up. Another thing I like that you brought this up too, because I actually had this conversation with this mother in the elevator, is about using that person's, you didn't say personality, but you mentioned how if they like to do a lot of gaming, but use it to, how could I use it to elevate them? How could I use it for purpose? And that is so true because she was in the elevator and she was saying, the child's making a lot of noise. And what came to my mind is like, I told her, I said, I have a nephew that talked a lot as well. But what I started realizing is as he got older, he became a great negotiator. And I said, I know her talking doesn't make sense right now, her boldness, because she was kept asking me questions. Like she didn't know me. Hey, how are you? Why are you so tall? And she just kept asking me these questions. And her mother almost felt embarrassed. And I'm like, there's purpose behind it. It may not make sense now because they're kids and they haven't had time to, right? live it out,
Mhm.
but it's going to make sense when they get older. And I understand you may have to kind of curb it and control it a little bit depending on the child, but there's something behind it. And if you can find how to use that person's personality and to find what purpose that or where it fits in their life or where it fits in their life in the future or better yet their purpose, then you will look at it even differently and you won't be so upset. Like you said about the person who plays a lot of video games, they may be the next app
You never
creator or
know.
something like that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Now at the same time, I'm the kind of parent, if you're playing video games, I'm gonna play with you too because I need to see what you're playing.
That's
And
true.
that could be used as a bonding moment too. Oh, you play
Definitely.
games? They go play the games together. Yeah, we're gonna
Mhm.
play these games. I ain't even gonna say some of these names because I don't want no issues. Uh, but I don't want them coming after Bishop. Oh, and whatever the
Yeah.
enrichments, whatever these terminology is. But yeah, I'm gonna be playing
I,
games with you because I need to see what's on this game. But at the same time, it's a bonding moment as well. But it also, like you said, goes right back to what Pastor Kim said. So yeah, I love that you brought those two examples out because that's the facts.
one
All
thing
right.
that I think we should I should just mention that when I look at the story in the Bible, where Jesus was found in a situation at a moment where the um oh gosh, not the Philistines. Oh God, what are those groups of people? The Pharisees,
Yeah.
or
For the
and the priests,
rulers and the lead, yeah.
right? And they were getting ready to stone this woman in the Bible,
Okay.
and we know the story very well. And Jesus said, let he that is without sin cast the first stone after stooping down on his knees and writing on the ground. And it it lets me realize that God does not shame people for struggling, but he meets them in their struggle. Uh,
Mhm.
and and knowing that and understanding that it should help parents when raising their child to not be so condemning and shameful in certain actions that they demonstrate, but being on a level with them can bring that resolution that Pastor Kim was talking about,
Yeah.
meeting them where they are. Because trust me, um, it. I don't think a child or a young person intentionally wants to be doing shameful things. Never mind be caught in
Mhm.
doing shameful things.
Right.
It's bad enough that they are
Mhm.
doing it and they know they're wrong. It gets worse when mommy and daddy find out about it. And in order to not pulp them and beat them down to the ground any further, as a parent, we should just help lift them out of what they're going through. Recognize the shame, recognize the pain, recognize the sorrow that one is feeling, and take that moment and try to change that moment and not harp on the issue that they are dealing with or the sin or the shame that they have committed, but finding the resolution on solving the problem is what we should really be looking
That is so
I
true,
think that
Bishop.
yeah.
I wanted to say that it is truth what you're saying because you know what, I personally dealt with that just not too long ago. I was dealing with a young person and it's like everybody was just getting at the wrong that this person was doing, and I sat down with this person. I said, let me tell you, all that matters is that you know that you did wrong and you're going
at.
to learn from it. You're going to move
Mhm.
from it, because if we continue to dwell on it, that person is now thinking all they ever see in me is that I did that. That's the wrong that they're looking at. When I sat down with this person and I was talking to them, I said, how do you feel right now? Like, well, everybody thinks this is who I am. Everybody thinks that. And it dawned to me that not once did we ever say, you know what? It's okay that you made that mistake. Because are we perfect? Nobody's perfect. Just as Bishop said, he who's without sin cast the first stone. That's what Jesus said. So why is it that we always want to condemn young people for the things that they did? But we were once like that. We made mistakes. We did bad things, right? But again, it's a cycle that we need to break, because when we did bad back in our days, when I did bad, I'm getting the whooping. I'm getting the yelled at. I'm getting the shame, right? But again, that's a generational thing that we got to break, because again, now more than ever, young people are falling into that depression mode. Young people are falling into that era where it's like, okay, you're yelling at me, and I don't know how to yell back because I gotta show you respect. But you know what? It hurts me. It hurts me. So I'm gonna shut down. I'm gonna do things. And sometimes young people act out on that very thing. My mom's gonna yell anyway. She's gonna cuss me. So whatever. I'm just gonna do it anyway.
Do it.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to do it anyway. But if we learn how to break from that, not yelling, just as Bishop said, just taking that moment to ask them, what was your initial thought? That's what I had to do. What were you thinking? You know, and that person actually looked at me and said, I wasn't thinking. I wasn't thinking. At the moment that I was doing it, it was all fun and
I
games.
love
But then it comes down to that. But again, when we move past that, when we say, okay, you did that,
that.
but we move past it and said, you know what? Let's learn from this. Let's move forward. That's what we need
I
to
love
learn to do. Telling young people, let's move forward. Because that gives them a sense of, okay, you want to see great in me. You want to see me do good.
Man, I would have loved to have you as my mentor growing up as a
Yeah.
kid. No, I didn't have none of that. What you mean? You're asking me? You're concerned? You really want to know what's
What?
going on, and you're not judging me,
Wait,
and you're not making
you
me feel
really
weird?
care to know?
What? No, I'm serious, Kim. This is
Yeah, I
awesome, man. I
know.
love that. I feel sometimes as adults, we act like we have amnesia. We forget we were off the chain too. You know what
Yep.
I'm saying? Like we did some stuff. Some of us did it in our thought process. We may not have acted it out, but we did some stuff. I was trying to share something with Bishop the other day, and he was trying to bring it out in me. I told him this is going to be on one of those membership segments, because I didn't want to get too raw.
The things that
Because
were coming out.
boy, what
Oh
man,
man.
y'all would take me back into the water of baptism, saying, but I'm just to show you what God saved me from, and the thoughts. Oh my gosh, only God knows this. I said to
What do you
God
got
one day,
know?
"Oh, talk
Yep.
about His goodness first, Lord. I am so happy you're the only one that knows some of my secrets. I need to be in prison with some of my thoughts. Like it's bad.
Oh
Like you
man.
should not, like, one of those, grab the kids, like get away. Like it's one of those. Yeah, that's kind of where it went. But the principle that Bishop was talking about, even what you were saying about Kim, is we are each other's help. The principle applies to like us as believers as well, right? I believe that because the struggle doesn't end when you get a certain age, is what I'm trying to go at, right? And we need to be each other's help. There's a scripture in the book of Matthew talks about how every kingdom divided against itself is brought to, I believe the word is desolation.
Yeah.
And then it talks about a city that's divided against itself cannot stand. That scripture in the book of Matthews. And so it's we as believers need to realize that we need to be able to help each other through our Christian walk. If anyone is attacked or there is a harsh struggle, I don't want to say like nobody in their life goes through it. If you're created, you're going to go through struggle. But when you are someone that has a purpose, you know the struggle is real. And especially you as a pastor, pastor bishop, you could relate to it. Your calling puts a target on the back of your kids. That's just the reality of it, right? And so instead of saying I'm looking at your three girls and I'm picking and judging, I need to see that I need to jump in with you and your wife and start to pray and intercede and help in that aspect for your kids too, right? So, and if we just be real with each other and then say, you know what, we all go through some struggles. We've all made mistakes. We've all did things that are embarrassing, and the list goes on and on. But I believe that we just need to be each other's help and be like Kim, which I love, be a place and a space, since we're going to go back to the young people, that they can go to have that conversation. to be able to be free, because not everybody has that adult, the parent that they could talk to. As we know, we grew up where we know there's only so much things we could tell our parents. There was this, I don't want to say what my parents were going to do. I mean, yeah, they'll beat you before you can even be like,
There's still things
yeah.
that I haven't told my mom. I'm 37.
I
I
had
still
some
haven't told her
deep
some things.
parents. And you know what? I'm gonna share this one thing, and I say why it's so dangerous. So when I was younger, I was molested, and because of how unapproachable, I would say my dad mostly. I'll put my mom in a different category, because the truth is, my father was abusive, physically abusive. So my mom was a product of his abuse. I never wanted to bring her anything to her. I thought she was living in her own hell. That's just the reality. I'm like, this lady's she's just trying to survive herself. I saw her as weak because of what I saw my father put her through, not realizing the opposite. She's actually stronger than I thought. But that's another story. So I didn't approach her because of that. Now here's my dad. When I was molested, I wanted to tell him, but it was so weird because I felt like two things. I was afraid of how he would approach me with it. Like, well, not necessarily what did you do? Because I don't know, I think I was maybe 7 or 8. So I didn't think he was going to think, what did you do to cause it in that aspect? It was more of, I don't know. He just was so harsh. I just felt like I was going to be blamed for it somehow because he wasn't approachable. Another part of it was, I thought he was so crazy that he might do something to this man and end up in jail. So there was because I loved him nonetheless. I didn't want to see him get in trouble. So I kept that secret my entire life. I took it on myself to revenge the guy. So from the age of 7 to the age of 11, I told myself, I'm going to get back. All this time, like now that I'm in hindsight looking back and having this conversation with God, he showed me the setup from the enemy. This something happens to you. The seed of revenge was brewing. So he wanted me to do something. So I'm going to jump way over to the age of 13. So I'm looking at him, and I remember I threatened him. I said, you are going to pay for what you did. And I meant it I meant it. For almost 3 to 5 years, I literally revenge was brewing in my head. My father always carried a gun. I knew where he hid it. I remember I went into the kitchen, got his gun. It was a Smith & Wesson. I went to the man's house that morning because my mom used to give us a little money. Me and my brother would go to the store, get candy. You're supposed to buy lunch, but you know how kids do it. We buying candy instead. I go to the guy's house, knock on his door, ready to do what I'm going to do. That morning, 6 o'clock that morning, because he had a neighbor who lived with him. When I knocked on the door, never forget, the man stuttered. I asked for the guy's name. I said, is he here? He said, this morning, some men came and pretty much took his life. That morning at 6 o'clock. And I think around 11 or ish, that's when I came to his door. And the crazy thing in that moment, I was mad at God because he didn't give me a chance to do what I wanted to do. But I didn't see today. I didn't see what God was preserving today. Right? So when I say all this, I wasn't able to even share none of this with my parents until the age of maybe 16, 17. It took that long for me to even feel comfortable to show them. So a lot of times when I was acting out and behaving and doing certain things, I wanted my parents to kind of understand why I did what I did, why I made the choices that I made. So with that kind of background, even my nieces and nephews, and I'm able to pick up on certain things because of what I saw and experienced, etc. That made me say, I feel like as parents, leaders, we really have to be a person where young people could feel so comfortable being raw and being authentic, because who knows if they're not healed, if they have any unhealed issues, who knows where the enemy is going to lead them to, what road they're going to lead them down. And that's why I feel it's something that we should not take lightly when it comes to the responsibility of having a young child in our lives, and to not dismiss things and to not discount things. and not to say they're just kids. They don't understand. And to be careful with our approach and how we handle what we hear, and to love them. Love them. I know, love them when they're hard to love. Love them when they're difficult. Love them when they don't listen. Love them when they tell you the most gut wrenching thing. Love
Words.
them nonetheless. Treat them the way God treats us. Deal with them the way God deals with us. God never throws us away. He doesn't look at us less. If anything he does, he tries to help us. How can I help you? Come to me. That's what he wants. He said, come to me. If you come to me, you give me the opportunity to help you, to heal you, to give you the peace, to free you, and to give you what you need, and to guide you in the better direction in life. But we have to, if we, and to say this last thing before, because I know time is running, a lot of the way we respond to our young people is a great example of how they would actually see Christ. So basically what I'm trying to say, we can be the God that they need to see before they truly understand God for themselves.
Wow. That
That was heavy?
was no. I mean, I think the more we do these podcasts, the more we peel off another chapter off of you, another layer comes off of you. But no, we enjoyed that. I was gonna ask you a question, but we're running out of time, so I wanted to just share the scripture based on what you just read from First Timothy chapter 4, verse 12, from the Amplified Version. Let no one look down on you because of your youth, but be an example and set a pattern for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in moral purity. We've been talking about, how do we treat one another or treat a child or youth when we are encountering certain situations, and how should a youth respond? This just pretty much goes into what you're saying, Sister Heather, as well as Pastor Kim. Don't let anyone discourage you from your upbringing, your youthhood, because you're young. I heard that a lot. Because you're young, because you're young this, because you're young that, because you're young that. Um, but when you know that the Lord has put a treasure inside of you, you've got to hold on to that. And I think one of the most fascinating things about the story you shared was, God already took care of him by the time you got there. God not only took care of him, but he was saving you.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, your life could have been totally different,
Yeah.
had you actually gone there to do what you planned to do, and God blocked it. Thank God for that. But,
Yes.
but, we just have to hold on to God's word. Let no one despise your youth, but set the believers as an example, and remember your Creator in the days of your youth. These scriptures are for the young people to remember, to hold on to hold fast to, in times of anxiety and depression, and you need a word of comfort. These are the scriptures that you've got to reference, and know that God is going to do something great. I'm going to give my final words. I know you're about to ask me, so sure, let me give it right now while I got the floor. Then I'll pass it to you, Pastor Kim and Heather. You do an amazing job at closing the way you do. Um, but my final remark is this. Um, One of the other final verses that the scripture shares is that I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. In another chapter, he says that I know the plans that I have for you.
Mm.
Um, this goes to show the end result. It, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and the end result is your children will have to fulfill God's promise. They will have to go through God's promise. Um, they 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 are part of the church right now, but God is still calling our sons. He's still calling our daughters. He's still calling young Samuels. He's still raising Davids. He's still raising Timothys. The struggle is real, but the grace of God is greater than anything that any one of us can ever face. The enemy targets this generation, but God has not abandoned this generation. God's hand is still on them. He's still on, his hand is still on all of our children. And I believe that there's still great in store for our younger generation, but continue to bring them to God and instill God in them because Jesus is the answer for the world today. Pastor Kim, what do you have to say?
Yes. What are your last words?
I want to
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much for joining, Pastor Kim, by the way.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Sister Heather, I wanted to say thank you for sharing your story. There are a lot of young people, young women who are out there that are struggling with telling their story. A lot of them have a story just like yours, including me, myself. And you know, the best thing about it is that God says that we are a chosen masterpiece, irreplaceable and dearly loved, exactly as we are. And if we can just come to the reconciliation of reconciling with ourselves first. That's where it starts. You know, a lot of us are broken. A lot of us are hurt. A lot of us don't even know. And when we tell somebody, you know, just leave it to God, it's easier said than done. But I'm a living, walking testimony of, and I'm sure Sister Heather Bishop is as well, how when you trust God, He take care of everything. He takes care of everything that you're going through. So my final encouragement to a young person out there that may be struggling, somebody may have been going through the same thing, you are chosen. You are loved. I live by Psalms 139 verse 14, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. No one didn't have to tell me how God was. No one had to tell me how I should trust God because I decided to do that for myself. When I was 14 years old and I told myself, I looked at myself and said, you will love yourself. You will be somebody. I did that all on my own. I didn't have no help, but I did that because I know that there was purpose. I knew God had a plan for me. So I'm here to encourage anybody that's out there that's struggling, going through the same thing. You have a purpose. And where you turn from there is only God can help you. Only God can bring you through. So stay strong.
Woo! There's power in his love. And I love it. Pastor Kim, Sister Kim, Kimmy Kim, thanks for hanging out with us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Listen, man, we were telling folks we're gonna get some people on here. I've been low key wanting you on there, but I just didn't know how to squeeze you in. And the last conversation we had, it's not posted yet because no, it's it's I post weekly, so I literally just post the last episode of the nine part series of the Fruit of the Spirit. So by the time you listen to
Mhm.
this, you know what? This conversation is so good. I'm gonna bump this up because we have two more that we did. I'm gonna bump this one up and I'm gonna post it this week. How about that? We're gonna
Man,
post it this week
come on
so
now.
we can hear it. 'Cause this is it. But we were talking about last one. We're like, man, like I don't know, like Bishop's heart was just really towards the young people. And no matter how much we have these different conversations, he's always, you know, his heart is there. So I felt like it would be fitting, it would be perfect to
Love
have
it.
somebody like you because you're not only a youth pastor, you like Bishop says, you work in the educational sector with children. So you see
Mm.
from all angles of what's
Yep.
happening and you lived it yourself. So there you
Mm-hmm.
go. So I thank so much that, you know, you took the time to hang with us. And listen, listeners, thank you too for taking time to hang with us here at Real Faith Podcast. We know that these aren't easy topics, but they're important ones. And if this conversation made you think, we'll love for you to join us for the next one. Subscribe, share it. You know, we're on Spotify, we are on YouTube and other podcast platforms, and share it with someone who you feel needs to hear this conversation. And we will see everyone, Real Faith family. We'll see you on the next one. Till next time, everyone. Take care.